Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to MTG Traders. My name is Taryn, and this is Modern Monday. Alright guys, from today going forward, the schedule is going to look a little bit different. So the videos are still going to be deck techs, but we also have on Mondays MTG Finance, which we of course posted just a minute ago. Then we have today's, which is a Modern Monday deck tech. Then Tuesday will be a standard deck tech, Wednesday a commander, Thursday dealer's choice, which means I get to pick whatever deck I want to do for that day, and then Friday of course is Fan Fridays. Also on Fridays we have the Upkeep, which is like a new show basically catching you up from the last week of MTG related news. I'm really wanting to start to diversify our content on the channel. I love doing standard, but I do think there are other formats that need some love. And I do think Modern, Commander, and maybe even things like Pauper and Vintage will have a place on this channel as well soon too. But of course, this is Modern Monday, and this is the first Modern Monday, and like, unsurprisingly, if you guys know me by now, the first deck we're going to cover on Modern Monday is a mill deck. More specifically, Esper Mill. And this original idea was actually given to me by a fan on a Fan Friday a couple of Fridays ago. And then I kind of tweaked it for myself, and then this is the deck tech for you today. But of course, before we get into the video, make sure to like the video if you like the video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And make sure to hit the bell right beside that for notifications so you know when we upload a new video on the channel and when we go live on the stream right here on YouTube. But of course, without further ado, let's get right into it. We have 4 creatures in the deck, and it is Hedron Crab, a 1-mana 0/2 crab with landfall. Of course, whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, target player puts the top 3 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So if you guys know anything about Modern, we're going to have a lot of lands coming in, and then we're going to sack those and get other lands out from our decks. That's 2 lands hitting the battlefield in 1 turn, which is 6 cards for a 1-mana 0/2. Also in the mid to late game, Hedron Crab can also just be a fantastic blocker for us, blocking lots of damages coming our way. But Hedron Crab is usually going to be our turn 1 play, if not our turn 2 play. Just a fantastic way to get early mill damage as soon as possible. Next up, we have 4 Path to Exile. This is an Esper color strategy here, so Path to Exile is going to be in here to kind of shut down those heavy creature-based strategies, and it's a 1 white mana instant. Exile target creature. Its controller may search his or her library for a basic land card, put that card into his or her battlefield tapped, then shuffle his or her library. I said his or her an extra time there, didn't I? But Path to Exile is also doing double duty for us because we have Archive Trap in the deck as well. I'll talk about that in just a second when we get there, but Path to Exile is a fantastic removal card for us for just 1 white mana. Next up, we have 3 Serum Visions, a sorcery, draw a card, scry 2, a fantastic way to, in the mid to late game, kind of set up our draws and be able to kind of like make sure we're not getting into land when we don't need to be, or getting to land when we need to be. It's really one of those cards that kind of sets us up for the next 2 turns. Moving on from Serum Visions, we have 3 Surgical Extraction, a 1 Phyrexian mana, which is either a black mana or pay 2 life, instant. Choose target card in a graveyard other than a basic land card. Search its owner's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with the same name, and exile them. Then that player shuffles his or her library. So this is a great way to get against a deck that's like a Death and Taxes deck or a lockdown strategy that we really don't like to deal with, is because we have lots of non-basic lands in our deck. So Surgical Extractions can help deal with that in the early game. Playing a Glimpse of the Unthinkable or either playing a Hedron Crab really helps us in making sure that a Surgical Extraction can come down and actually get something that's of use in the game 1 or maybe even game 2 strategy. Either way, I love Surgical Extraction, a fantastic card, and one of the first cards I actually ever had when I was playing Paper Magic, because I got in kind of like during the Scars of Mirrodon, Worldwake, that kind of area, and played with some new Phyrexia cards, and it was fun. Moving on, we have some draw power. We have 3 Visions of Beyond, a 1-mana instant, draw a card. If a graveyard has 20 or more cards in it, draw 3 cards instead. So a 1-mana draw card is not great, but a 1-mana draw 3 cards is fantastic. And because we're a mill deck, having 20 cards in a particular player's graveyard is actually going to be quite easy for us. And that can almost be by turn 3, depending on what our opponent's doing. Moving on though, we have 4 Glimpse of the Unthinkable, a 1 blue, 1 black sorcery. Target player puts the top 10 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So Glimpse of the Unthinkable is actually being reprinted into Iconic Master, so hopefully the price is coming down, but it's still kind of expensive right now for us. But Glimpse of the Unthinkable is probably the premier and probably the best just outright mill card, period. 2 mana, mill 2. Super simple, super effective, and super devastating. That's 1/5 of our opponent's library. I say 1/5 because they'll probably have 53 cards at the start of the game if they did not mulligan, so just devastating. Next up, we have 3 Mind Funeral. This is basically a way to end a match for us. A 3-mana sorcery, target opponent reveals cards from the top of his or her library until 4 land cards are revealed. That player puts all cards revealed this way into his or her graveyard, so if our opponent has probably less than 20 cards, Mind Funeral might be or will be a way to basically end the match for us outright. Unless we're really unlucky and then we only get to mill 3 cards. So Mind Funeral can actually be a a fantastic way to kind of kill our opponent, or a terrible way to just make sure they don't hit lands for the next turn. Either way, Mind Funeral is super fun for us and a great inclusion in this deck. Next up, we have 4 Archive Trap. Now, keep in mind, I was talking about Path to Exile earlier. Path to Exile makes our opponent, or has a May ability where our opponent can search their library for a basic land and put it on the battlefield tapped. Well, Archive Trap is a 5-mana instant trap that if an opponent searches his or her library this turn, you may pay 0 rather than pay Archive Trap's mana cost. And that's target opponent puts the top 13 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So if they decide to search their deck with Path to Exile, or if they just kind of crack their own kind of fetch land or something like that, Archive Trap is going to make them mill 13. So having these in an opening hand, or having more than one in an opening hand, usually means you're going to win the match outright. Archive Trap is just devastatingly powerful. Having 2 Archive Traps or an Archive Trap and an Essence Extraction in our opening hand is just ridiculous and can basically win the match on turn 2 for us. But moving on from Archive Trap, which I would say is probably the best, if besides the Glimpse of the Unthinkable in milling, we have 4 Breaking and Entering. We're not going to be using Entering at all, but Breaking has a target player puts the top 8 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So not as good as Glimpse of the Unthinkable, but it's still pretty decent because it is 8 cards instead of 10. There are a lot of other cards that actually mill 5, 6, 7, that kind of stuff, but Breaking does 8, and I think that's fantastic. Now, Entering on it, we're not going to use that at all because we don't have red mana. Moving on from Breaking and Entering, though, we have 3 Mesmeric Orb, a 2-mana artifact. Whenever a permanent becomes untapped, that permanent's controller puts a top card of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So it's just overall fantastic early game advantage for us on a turn 2 play. So basically, this is going to be a card against Affinity where our opponent's going to be tapping out lots of 0 mana cost artifacts, and if they untap it, they're going to be milling 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cards into their graveyard. Mesmeric Orb can also mill yourself though too, so you want to be careful when you play these cards out. They might be coming out and being put into the sideboard depending on the matchup you're up against, but Mesmeric Orb, besides that, is very good for us. Next up, we have 3 Fragment Sanity. This is actually a newer card for us in the deck. A 3-mana enchantment or a curse, enchant player. At the beginning of each Eon step, enchanted player puts a top X card of his or her library into his or her graveyard, where X is the number of cards put in that graveyard from anywhere this turn. So if we mill them for 10, we actually mill them for 20, thanks to Fragment Sanity being on the battlefield. So this is basically a mill more or win more card for us in the deck. But Fragment Sanity is also fantastic for us because there's really not that many cards that actually deal with enchantments in Game 1 in Modern at the moment. So I think Fragment Sanity is actually safe to put in the Game 1 here. It can be coming out in Game 2 as well. But Fragment Sanity for us, because a lot of people in Modern play fetch lands, Fragment Sanity can actually do a lot of extra damage to our opponent thanks to cards going into their graveyard. And that is it for cards in the main board besides lands. Let's go over lands real quick. We have 3 Darkslick Shores. This is basically a fast land for us, tapping for blue and black. Then we have 2 Flooded Strands. This is going to be a great fetch land for us. Then we have 2 Ghost Quarter, another way to destroy something and have our opponent search his or her library for a basic land card. It's a May ability again, so if they do this, an Archive Trap trigger for free can be coming out and doing tons of damage as well. Next up, we have 2 Hollowed Fountain, which is a fantastic card for us here. Again, it comes in if you want to pay 2 life untapped. If not, it can just be tapping for white and blue the following turn. Then we have 2 Marsh Flats, another fetch land for us, grabbing a swamp or a plains. Then we have Polluted Delta, another fetch land for us. Then we have 3 Shellduck Isle. Shellduck Isle is interesting for us because it has the ability Hideaway, which of course when this land comes into play tapped, when it does, look at the top 4 cards of your library, remove one of them from the game face down, then put the rest on the bottom of your library. It can tap for blue mana as always, but you can also pay 1 blue and tap it. You may play their removed card without paying its mana cost if a library has 20 or fewer cards in it. So if we're milling our opponent really quickly and we have a card that's going to be a finisher from Shellduck Isle, we can definitely pay the 1 mana and tap this and get that out from underneath the Shellduck Isle. And of course, it's paying it for free, so if we get a Mind Funeral or an Archive Trap underneath Shellduck Isle, it's going to be a great way to close out the match. Next up, we have 1 Watery Grave, which of course is a pay 2 life or it comes in tapped black and blue. Then we have 1 Godless Shrine. It's the same thing, so pay 2 life unless it comes in tapped, a white or black. Then 1 Plains, 1 Island, and 1 Swamp. And that is the full 60 of Game 1. So there are a lot of things we can do in Game 2 with the sideboard here. A lot of it's going to be basically going up against Affinity, any kind of like aggro-based strategy, any kind of heavy creature-based strategy. We want to make sure that we're going up against those as quickly as we possibly can. We don't have much tech against a control strategy, but in Modern, there really aren't that many control decks that really do a lot of damage to us because we're very, very fast. But let's go over the sideboard real quick. we have 2 Fragment Eyes, a 1-mana sorcery, destroy target artifact or enchantment with converted mana cost 4 or less. This is basically representing like the new cards coming in to the format like Walking Ballista, Art of Kieran, any kind of other artifact and affinity that we don't like dealing with, as well as enchantments from other decks. So it's a 2-for-1 here, just for 1 mana. Great card for us. Then we have 1 Echoing Truth, a 2-mana instant, return target non-land permanent card and other permanents with the same name as the permanent to their owner's hand. So a great way to deal with any kind of token-based strategy or infinite-based strategy. Just fantastic for us. Then we have 1 Gaia's Blessing. This is a 2-mana sorcery, but it really doesn't matter about that. The secondary ability is what matters for us. When Gaia's Blessing is put into your graveyard from your library, shuffle your graveyard into your library. So this is a great way to be an anti-mill strategy against another mill deck. Now, very rarely will you go up against another mill deck in the format, but Gaia's Blessing is here just to kind of represent that a little bit, and it's also a super cheap card for us. I think it's like maybe 20 tickets on MTGO. Next up, we have 2 Hercules Recall, a 2-mana instant, return all artifacts target player owns to his or her hand. So a fantastic way to kind of shut down an affinity player, which is like going to be one of the top decks you're going to be going up against in the meta. Next up, we have 3 Rest in Peace, a 2-mana enchantment. When Rest in Peace enters the battlefield, exile all cards from all graveyards. And if a card or a token we put into the graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. This is a great way to combat against Dredge, anything like that, Delve, all that kind of stuff. Rest in Peace is going to help deal with that really well. Next up, we have another anti-affinity card. We have 2 Sony Silence. Activated abilities of artifacts can't be activated, so Hercules Recall and Sony Silence will be coming in to deal with that deck handedly. The reason there is so much removal as far as artifacts in here in the sideboard is because in testing with this deck, I went up against like probably an infinite number of affinity decks. It was just fun, but also we really needed some tech to go up against them. Next up, we have 2 Crypt Incursion, a 3-mana instant, exile all creature cards from target player's graveyard. You gain 3 life for each card exiled this way. So against a more creature-heavy strategy, a human's deck or an elf's deck, Crypt Incursion is a fantastic way for us to gain some life, gain some value, and of course, exile any cards that are in their graveyard. And the last 2 cards in the sideboard here, we have 2 Leyline of Sanctity, a 4-mana enchantment. If Leyline is in your opening hand, you may begin the game with it on the battlefield, and of course, you have hexproof. So another fantastic way to just kind of lock down another mill strategy as well, but also some other strategies like a bird strategy, Rakdos Bird, like those kind of things in the meta in Modern. But that is the full 75. Let's go to the layout here, guys. This is the first Modern deck on the channel, so go easy on me. I'm still kind of new to the format in general, but I did want to do a mill deck, and I think the deck that we actually went over on Fan Fridays a couple Fridays ago was a fantastic starting point. I love this deck, and I'm definitely going to be probably getting this in paper myself pretty soon too. On MTGO Traders, it's coming to about 254 tickets, and on paper, I think it's about $585. That's in the middle range to most Modern decks these days. Most Modern decks I'm kind of seeing right now are in the $600 to $800 to $1,000 range, so this is like a good middle-of-the-road deck for us, and I think that is awesome, especially for a deck like Mill. But of course, let me know what you think. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you have any suggestions for it? Leave it in the comments below. I'm still new to the Modern format myself, so really kind of like making sure I can kind of like take in the breadth of what all of the cards are in Modern at the moment, so it's been kind of a joy going through all the cards in Modern and just kind of like building decks for the next couple of weeks for Modern Mondays. And I'm really excited to show them off to you guys. We've got control decks, we've got human-based decks, we've got elf-based decks, we've got aggro-based, we've got tempo, we've got everything. And I'm really excited to show them off on the channel. But of course, that does it for the video today, guys. Like the video if you liked it, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And make sure to hit that bell right beside the subscription button to know when we upload a video on the channel and when we go live on the stream right here on YouTube. But I love you guys, and I will see you in the next video. Oh, keep in mind that we also have a preview season coming up, I think next week. I'm not entirely sure when Rivals of Ixalan actually starts, but I will be doing preview season for that every single day as well. So, lots of videos in the future. Just look out for that. All right, peace.